This is a CBS News Colorado special. Voters decide. The Congressional District 8 debate.
Control of Congress could come down to one race, Colorado's Congressional District 8.
I think it's turned into a tougher race.
Everyone in the country is watching this race very carefully.
The race pits Colorado's first Latina member of Congress.
We released a package of bills that looks also at the cost of groceries, of water, of car insurance.
Against a state lawmaker and military veteran.
Trying to take care of my country, trying to take care of my state, trying to take care of my community, and make sure that folks can live the American dream.
It's going to go to the wire.
Hello, I'm your political reporter, Sean Boyd. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to our candidates. Congresswoman Yadira Caraveo is the Democratic incumbent. She's a former state lawmaker and the state's first Latina and first pediatrician to serve in Congress. Representative Gabe Evans is a state lawmaker and a farmer, and he's also a former Army Black Hawk helicopter pilot and police officer. Before we get started, a few ground rules. The candidates agreed to 1-minute answers and 30-second rebuttals at my discretion. They did not receive questions in advance, and I'm going to leave the fact-checking to them. All right, let's get started. Our first subject is the cost of living. Congresswoman, Vice President Kamala Harris supports price controls for groceries, rent, pharmaceuticals. Economists on both sides warn price controls do more harm than good, stifling innovation and leading to shortages. What, if any, price controls would you support at the federal level?
You know, I've addressed this issue with my own package of bills, one specifically that looks at the cost of child care and sees what are the factors that are driving up the price, especially in places like Colorado that have rural areas with even less access to child care, that look at the price of water and make sure that we are creating a program to make sure that, just like gas and electricity, those with very low incomes, that we're helping them with that. And at car insurance, an issue that actually President Trump tweeted about the same day that I released my package of bills, looking at why exactly Colorado has such high prices around car insurance. And so it's not necessarily controlling prices. It's looking at what the factors are, making sure that we're applying pressure to companies and making sure that the government is doing all it can to bring down the bottom line for people.
So you don't support price controls. I know you did support a bill at the Capitol that set up a board that did control the price of some drugs, but you don't support that at the federal level.
I think that for medications, it's very different, but I would not do that across the board in other sectors.
Okay. Representative Evans, former President Trump plans to impose a 10 to 20% tariff on everything imported into the country. Economists on both sides again warn that could increase costs by about $2,000 a year for the average household. Do you support higher tariffs? And if so, how do you address those price hikes?
Great question. When we're talking about tariffs, we have to draw a distinction between countries like China that do not compete fairly in the international market. The Chinese Communist government heavily subsidizes a lot of their industries, and then China has a long record of human rights violation where they use things like slave labor to be able to produce these goods. And so for countries like China, we have to make sure that we're using every tool at our disposal to make sure that they are playing by the international rules and that our corporations and companies, our job makers here in the United States, have a level playing field to compete. For the rest of the international economy, for folks that are trying to follow the rules, I'm generally a free trade person. Whenever this conversation of tariffs comes up with, the root of the issue is how do we maintain a positive business environment where job creators can stay here in the United States rather than shipping jobs overseas. And so I am a strong proponent of slashing red tape and regulations so that jobs can come back here to the United States.
Okay, let's switch to immigration. Representative Evans, we'll start with you this time. The U.S. is facing a worker shortage, and analysts say mass deportation would exacerbate it, causing disruptions in industries like construction, healthcare, and agriculture. Do you support mass deportation, and how would you address the worker shortage? Also, would you support amnesty for some migrants, like dreamers or model citizens?
So when it comes to the border, I've had a very clear three-step plan. We must secure the border, something that my opponent has called on the president to defund from, defund Immigration and Customs, defund the Border Patrol. We have to make sure that we're fixing the system for those folks who want to come here and work legally. My grandfather came to the country from Mexico, earned his citizenship with 2 Purple Hearts in World War II. We have to make sure that we're fixing this system for folks that want to come here either to become citizens or to work, as you said, in our economy without perhaps becoming citizens. We also have to empower our law enforcement to be able to deport those folks that are in our countries and causing and committing other crimes. My opponent has voted to prohibit law enforcement from even being able to coordinate with immigration and customs to have those violent folks in our communities deported. That's the plan that I support. I think once we start enforcing the laws, what we'll see is that the violent criminals are going to be deported from our communities, and the other folks are going to be able to take their place in that line to legally follow our laws to come live here or work here.
So you don't support mass deportation. You want to start with criminals first.
We have to aggressively prioritize those criminals.
Okay. Congresswoman, many Democrats favor mass amnesty over mass deportation, which would make migrants eligible for, among other things, Social Security and Medicare, which, as I'm sure you know, are already going broke. Do you support mass amnesty, including for criminals? And if so, where would you get the money?
Well, what we need around immigration is reform that has not happened for about 40 years. The last time that we had any comprehensive laws passed on this was when my parents were able to naturalize their status in the 80s. So what we need to do is look at a balanced approach. Quite frankly, that the Senate did in a bill that was presented then to a person that you saw on screen earlier who has endorsed my candidate, House Speaker Mike Johnson, and it was not brought up for a vote before us because President Trump decided that this is a better issue for Republicans to run on than to actually solve. What we need to do is to look at a balanced approach that secures the border, that creates a legal pathway for citizenship to address worker shortages, but that also makes sure that we're looking at people like Dreamers, et cetera, and legalizing their status.
All right. Every election, I give political ads a reality check. Perhaps you've seen some of my reality checks. There's been no shortage of ads in this race, and some of the claims are suspect at best. In this part of the debate, we're going to listen to a clip from an ad and give each of you a minute to respond. We'll begin with an ad by Congresswoman Caraveo.
But all I see in Washington is MAGA extremists like Gabe Evans. He only cares about that Boebert stuff. Banning abortion, invalidating gay marriages, rewriting the Constitution.
So I found this to be misleading on abortion. He's been inconsistent on exceptions, but he's repeatedly said he does not support a ban. Why did you say he did?
Because he's saying that now that he's running for Congress. 2 years ago, when he was running for the state House, I have looked at the survey myself, and there is a question asking, do you support banning abortion for every instance other than the life of the mother? And he marked support. Therefore, incest and rape, he doesn't seem to have included any exceptions for that. Now that he's running for Congress and he knows that public opinion is against him, he's trying to reverse his opinion.
So, Representative Evans, you do support exceptions, as you've said repeatedly, for rape, incest, and a mother's life. Any other exceptions early in a pregnancy, perhaps, or before viability?
Yeah, so I've been very clear on my position. I do not support a national abortion ban. I support exceptions for rape, incest, for life of the mother. And my voting record since day one has borne this out. Every year at the state legislature, we've had Republican bills that would have infringed upon those exceptions. And I bucked my own party. I was one of only 5 Republican legislators that did not sign on to or support those bills. So since day one, my position has been absolutely clear. I support exceptions for rape, incest, life of the mother. I do not support a national abortion ban. And my opponent's voting record has been equally clear. She supports abortion up to the moment of birth, paid for by taxpayer dollars. She voted against funding our military, giving our servicemen and women a cost of living raise because that bill did not allow her to take money from the military and use it to pay for abortions.
But my question was, do you support other exceptions? Like I said, early in a pregnancy, before viability.
I think the Supreme Court was very clear when it ruled on this. It sent the issue back to the states. And so that's going to be something that the states are left to figure out. Here in Colorado, again, per the legislation that my opponent passed, up to the moment of birth, abortion is legal.
So you won't say whether you support an exception at some point along the line? I mean, we've had 3 personhood measures in this state, so I would think you've given it some thought.
Yeah, like I said, the Supreme Court sent this one back to the states. It's up to the states to decide. In Colorado, abortion is legal up to the moment of birth.
Right. So I'm going to turn to an ad by you, Representative Evans.
Border is a mess.
And we're dealing with the consequences. Drugs and crime are flowing into our community.
And Yadira Caraveo is responsible for it all.
I found that to be an exaggeration. Your claim is based primarily on her opposition to the Republicans' Secure the Border Act last year, which every House Democrat opposed. How do you defend the claim?
So I believe that representatives are responsible for their votes. Let's run through her voting record. Voted against building more border wall, voted to lower to effectively an unenforceable level the penalty for drug dealers in our community, voted for defund the police legislation, voted for sanctuary city and state legislation, voted to lower the penalties for violent criminals who commit crimes with firearms, voted to make it easier for those violent criminals to then get out of jail. This isn't just 1 or 2 votes. This is a long list of votes that have resulted in a massive drug and public safety crisis. Here in Colorado, we're the 3rd most dangerous state in the country. We're the number 2 state in the country for teenagers overdosing and dying on fentanyl. And as a police officer for 10 years who worked under the bills that my opponent passed, I saw the day-to-day impact of these things. And I know that it's time for us to fix these broken policies, support our law enforcement officers, hold criminals and drug dealers accountable, and secure the border.
Okay. Congresswoman, in a debate last week, you said you vote on immigration based on what your constituents want, not what you personally want, like defunding ICE and Border Patrol, not allowing local police to cooperate with ICE, providing taxpayer-funded housing to people here illegally. If your beliefs are so different from your constituents, are you really the best person to represent them?
Yes, because every single day I have tough conversations with constituents, and I take their advice and their opinions into account. It's exactly the same thing that I did as a doctor. Sometimes you don't agree exactly with all of the ways that a person approaches an illness or the ways that they live, but you take in the information, you see what the situation is that they're in, and then you help them make the decision that is going to best fit them. That is what I'm doing as a representative. I am taking in the information that my constituents are giving me, and I'm voting in line with what they want to see in their community.
Can you confirm, though, defunding ICE and Border Patrol, not allowing local police to cooperate with ICE, providing taxpayer funded to people here illegally, those are all things that you support personally, right?
Not necessarily, but in terms of local cooperation of police forces, the local government should not be doing what the federal government's job is. We have failed as the federal government to set proper immigration codes to reduce illegal immigration. It should not be up to local police forces to enforce that.
The defunding of ICE and Border Patrol, while we've got so many migrants coming in, you don't support that anymore?
I do not support that.
Okay. Our next subject is energy. In Colorado and nationwide, utilities are seeing unprecedented demand for electricity. AI data centers, electric vehicles, a resurgence of manufacturing among the reasons. There are concerns about blackouts and higher costs for consumers. What should Congress do to address this? And Representative Evans, does the U.S. still have an obligation to meet its greenhouse gas targets?
When it comes to energy, nobody wants cleaner air, cleaner water than I do. My second son, he had 5 surgeries by the time he was 5. He has some problems with his lungs. And so every day, whenever we have poor air quality, I see the direct physical impact that has on him. But we have to follow the science in this space. And what the science says is that the world needs more energy, not less. And American energy is the cleanest energy that we have really in the world. If we replaced natural gas in Western Europe with American natural gas versus Russian natural gas, we would save the world about 200 million tons of carbon emissions every year. The problem is, my opponent has opposed American energy at every term. She brought the most damaging bill in Colorado history to our energy sector, and that resulted in a 90% decrease in new wells being permitted in the 3 years after after that bill passed than the 3 years before, and it has cost the economic sector in the 8th Congressional millions to billions of dollars. I know how to fix it. Take the handcuffs off American energy.
Okay. Congresswoman, you were the lead sponsor of a bill at the Capitol that created a host of new regulations for oil and gas. Would you vote for a similar bill at the federal level?
What that bill did, it was exactly what my opponent is talking about: balance the needs of local municipalities so that they can make their own decisions about whether to continue fostering oil and gas production, and how to balance that with the health and safety of their communities, deciding whether it should be within 500 feet of a hospital or a school or not. That's what Senate Bill 181 did, and the oil and gas industry in the 8th District, in my own district, continues to thrive. We can do both. We can talk about the need for safety and the focus on the health of our kids, like the ones that I saw having asthma attacks in clinics, and continue to foster the oil and gas production here in the 8th District, here in Colorado, and across the country, while also focusing on renewable energy that is going to be the next economic driving factor.
Quick rebuttal.
Thank you. In 2018, the voters of Colorado spoke on this. There was a ballot proposition that said, do we mess with how oil and gas is produced or leave it alone? 57% of Colorado voted, popular vote, leave it alone. Less than 4 months later, my opponent passed that same thing anyway. She didn't listen to the will of the people then. She's continuing voting that way in Congress, and it's costing the district billions of dollars.
The ballot measure dealt primarily with the setbacks, right? Food safety is also in the headlines these days. This week, nearly 12 million pounds of meat products were recalled because of listeria contamination. This follows the massive boar's head scare. This has raised questions about how the USDA handles such outbreaks. Is enough being done to keep our food safe, Congresswoman?
Clearly, there is not. I think a lot of the issues that agencies have, including the USDA, is how we fund them. The fact that we continue to pass continuing resolution after continuing resolution. This year, we have come up against, in the last 2 years, as I've been in Congress, almost defaulting on our national debt, not being able to pass a budget, a Republican-controlled House that can't get its own bills past the finish line. And agencies are affected, and so we need to get back to actually writing a legislation, actually passing budgets. Passing the Farm Bill would be really wonderful, a bill that I have been a great proponent of and have many marker bills in to focus both on nutrition and what farmers and ranchers need here in the 8th District.
Representative Evans?
I'm a beef producer. I actually contribute to the food supply by producing pasture-raised, grass-fed beef. I take it to a USDA-inspected facility. Just earlier this week, I was at one of the largest dairies in the 8th Congressional District watching and looking at how they follow their food safety protocol. So we can always do more to improve the safety of our food supply, but what we have to make sure that we're doing is we're working hand in hand with our producers, and that we're not creating onerous new regulations that detract from the core mission of the USDA, of the FDA, of our food producers, which is to produce safe, secure food. And we have to make sure that they're not being bogged down in excessive other red tape and over-regulations. One of the biggest things that I hear from my constituents in the district that are agricultural producers is that the number of new regulations, many of which my opponent has championed around energy, take a lot of their focus away from being able to actually work hand in hand with the regulatory agencies to produce that safe food, and instead meet a bunch of Green New Deal style mandates.
Thank you. Turning to health care, Colorado passed a law to import Canadian drugs and has been waiting 21 months for a federal waiver. If elected, what, if anything, would you do to speed approval? Representative Evans?
What we need to do in the healthcare space is put the experts back in charge. That's doctors and that's their patients. When we see costs increase, when we see wait times increase, as is happening right now, actually, there was a 9% increase in Colorado this year for just the cost of health insurance for folks. That is a direct result, again, of overregulation and red tape. And my opponent has voted for some of the largest regulatory bills in this space that take control of medicine, of healthcare, of the production of these life-saving things, again, that my second son needs on a daily basis. He needs an inhaled steroid every morning. He needs a growth hormone shot every night. That ounce for ounce is more valuable than gold. So I've spent a lot of time looking into these issues. We need to put doctors and patients back in charge. We need to, again, cut the punitive regulations in this space. That is going to allow our healthcare economy to flourish. That's going to bring down a lot of these costs and wait times that folks are seeing.
What about the Canadian drug approval for that program? Do you support that?
Yeah, we need to have a free market system that allows safe drugs to come into it from really whatever source we can identify them. If they're safe, just talked about food safety.
Yep.
I'm a free market person.
Okay, Congresswoman?
You know, it's wonderful to hear my own talking points parroted by my opponent about putting patients and doctors right back into the center of medicine. That's what I did every single day for over 10 years. And that's the reason that I left clinic and ran for Congress, because having these conversations about the price of prescription drugs was not what I should be doing with patients. I should be talking to them about their treatments. So he may be using my talking points, but he doesn't back it up when he goes to vote. He voted against capping the cost of EpiPens here in Colorado, a bill that would have lowered the price from up to $600 a pop, so that parents like the ones that I saw in clinic have to question, gosh, is my kid really having an allergic reaction? Should I spend this $600 medication or not? He voted against that. He says that he doesn't support Medicare negotiating prices on medications. He says that he does not support continuing the ACA, which would mean that people go back to having insurance companies cancel their coverage because of pre-existing conditions. So he may think that patients and families need to be at the center. He doesn't vote that way.
You want to address some of those?
Again, I have to get a medication for my son that's more expensive ounce for ounce than gold. And so I've had a lot of conversations with insurers as our insurance situation has shifted. And I've asked them, how do we make sure that this medication stays available? Does passing an arbitrary price cap actually do that? Or does that make it harder for me to actually get an insurance company to cover this? And there was a lot of concerns from the insurance companies that an arbitrary price cap actually makes it less accessible. In terms of the ACA, that was 15 years ago. And again, we just said Coloradans faced a 9% increase just this year. We have to go back and make sure that we are making healthcare actually available and affordable.
Thank you. The Congressional Budget Office recently reported the federal government will spend $607 billion this year on Medicaid, which 37% of residents in Adams County rely on. Do you support expanding or restricting enrollment and eligibility? Congresswoman?
Medicaid was the only way that many of the children that I saw in clinic every day were able to access the care that I was able to give them. 2/3 of the kids that I saw in clinic every day were on Medicaid. They would not be able to see a doctor if it were not for that program. We should not be cutting the deficit on the backs of children, on the backs of working families. And so anything that touches Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, I'm not going to be supportive of, because it'll hurt more than 1/3 of the constituents in my district. These are programs that are widespread, that people have paid into. They deserve to have health care.
Representative Evans?
So corollary to Medicaid is obviously Medicare. I just want it to be on the record that my opponent voted to take $180 million out of Medicare and use it to pay for EV tax credits. When it comes to Medicaid, we're actually going through a big audit on this right now at the state capitol. I can get tens of millions more dollars into doctors and patients' hands through the Medicaid program just by making the system as efficient as the federal government requires it to be. There's tens of millions of dollars that are going to third-party contractors that aren't going to doctors and patients. Just by making streamlining and making the system actually work, we can get tens of millions of dollars back into this program. We can make sure, as I've said all along, that folks actually have access to that critical health care for the situations that they're facing in their day-to-day life.
Congresswoman, quick rebuttal.
I really don't know what he's talking about with the electric vehicle credits. I've actually voted against mandates that the Biden administration tried to impose on people around electric vehicles, just like I told President Biden that it was wrong to say that we would no longer export liquid natural gas from the 8th District to other countries.
Okay, it is time for you to ask each other a question. We flipped a coin before we got started, and Congresswoman, you're up.
Right. Thank you so much, Sean. Representative Evans, you've worked with a group of far-right MAGA individuals to try to rewrite the Constitution here in Colorado, looking at gay marriage, trying to invalidate marriages, making sure that there would be a national abortion ban and defunding our schools. Would you do that in Congress?
So the group that you're referring to is it'll come to me in a second. But their focus is on things like balanced budget and term limits. And so I have said I support a term limits amendment and I support a balanced budget amendment. So it's a pure equivocation to say that this has any nexus to abortion, which I've been very clear that I don't support a national abortion ban. I do support the 3 exceptions that we've talked about before. And to say that this is a position that I have on gay marriage is absolutely preposterous. I've been endorsed by the log cabin Republicans, which are the gay Republicans. And so the group that you're talking about, again, the 2 amendments that I have said I would support are balanced budget and term limits.
The group is called the Convention of States, and you have filled out questionnaires recently saying that marriage should only be between a woman and a man. So,
okay. Representative, your question for Congresswoman.
Thank you. Convention of States, they support balanced budget, they support term limits. My question is, we've talked a lot about your voting record. Voted against the border wall, voted to lower the penalty for drug dealers, voted for defund the police style policies, voted for sanctuary state policies, voted to lower the penalty for people who commit violent crimes with firearms from 15 years to 4 years. Are there any of those votes that you would reconsider?
I don't have to reconsider them because they're lies. The way that you misconstrue some of those votes has by other news agencies been called pure BS. And so in terms of fentanyl, I'm a doctor. I have seen patients every single day who their mom or their dad, sometimes both, are gone, either because they're in jail or because they have died of an overdose. The idea that I would ever purposely harm anyone is absolutely absurd. It goes against actually the oath that I took. What Representative Evans constantly talks about is a bill where bipartisan, both parties here in Colorado tried to balance the need to punish drug dealers and cartels, but not incarcerate every single person that is addicted. Balancing mental health and incarceration and penalties for fentanyl, that is something that I did at the state legislature. I have continued that in Congress.
And you've changed your mind on the defunding of ICE and Border Patrol, you said. So I think it is time for closing remarks. And based on a coin toss, I believe Representative Evans, you're up first.
Thank you. And thank you, Colorado, for tuning in and listening. The choice before us is clear. Do we secure the border or do we leave the border open? Do we hold accountable fentanyl and drug dealers in our community, or do we continue to coddle them with soft on crime policies? Do we defund the police or do we support law enforcement to keep our communities safe? Do we reward work or do we punish work? My opponent's voting record is clear. She's voted for open borders, sanctuary city and state policies, lowering the penalty for drug dealers, defunding the police, and punishing work. That's not bipartisan. That is not common sense. As a cop and a soldier for 22 combined years, as a husband, as a father of 2 boys, as the grandson of Hispanic immigrants, I know there's a better path. I was able to get 60% of my bills passed in the state capitol despite being in a super minority. I have the support of 2/3 of the mayors in the 8th Congressional District because I can work together to make Colorado a safe, affordable place to live, work, and raise families. Gabe Evans would be honored to earn your vote.
Thank you, Congresswoman.
Well, thank you, Sean, for having this debate today. Thank you to all the viewers, and thank you to my opponent for being here. You know, I grew up right here in Adams County, the daughter of immigrants, the daughter of a construction worker who was able to retire after 51 years because of programs like Social Security and Medicare. I was able to live my version of the American dream. I went on to become a doctor and saw the needs that my community continued to have when I took care of them every single day. So as a state legislator, I have made sure to lower the cost of prescription drugs and other means of health care. I've made sure to cut taxes for the middle class. And then when I went on to Congress, I have made sure to be an effective and bipartisan legislator, being ranked as the 8th most bipartisan freshman member of Congress and being one and actually the first freshman member to have a bill signed into law by President Biden. I hope to continue to do this work for you for 2 more years.
All right. Thank you. Thank you both. And thank you all for watching. Election Day is November 5th.